Thank you, Ella, for your inspiring speech. I wish I could speak like her.
You're good enough, Yoon, so don't worry. Now, can you please introduce us our next speaker?
Oh yes. Our next speaker is Tony Yoon for grade 12, who will be giving us a speech about the International Hermit.
Please welcome Tony Yoon to the stage.
Now, when you usually talk about a hermit, or describe someone as being a hermit, you're usually talking about someone who is antisocial, or someone who doesn't like to associate themselves with the outside world or people surrounding them. Now, I think that definition is a little unfair to at least one of the animals I know, and that is the hermit crab. Now, I used to grow 3 of them when I was young, and that's why I have fond memories of it. I used to have 3 of them. One of them was called Berg, the other one was called Lawrence, and the third one was called Abby. And one day, I came back from school to find that Berg had been eaten by Lawrence, who had been eaten by Abby, who had disappeared and we could never find her again. But aside from having memories of keeping them as pets, what makes hermit crabs so unique is the fact that once they become too large for their shell, what they have to do is they have to shed their shell and leave it behind, and go and search for a new, larger shell that they can live in and call home. Now, this might sound simple, but actually it's not as simple as it sounds, because yes, they have this shell to protect them, but, well, even with their shells, they're really popular seafood to predators from both the sea and on the surface. So, what usually ends up happening is, without their shell, they become even more vulnerable to the surroundings or predators in nature. So, if I were in the shoes of the hermit crab, I would feel really insecure about myself, going from one shell to another. Now, why am I talking about the hermit crab? Well, that's because I think everyone in here, and myself included, should take the hermit crab as an example of how to live international. And as we strive to live internationally as international students, this is the animal that we should strive to be like. Now, to make that a little more clear, let me talk a little bit more about myself. Now, this is my family photo, and this is me when I was 9. Oh, sorry, this is me when I was 9. And until I was 9, I really never had a chance to explore the outside world. I was usually living within the protective ethnic and cultural shell of Korea. I lived in a city called Seoul, and I lived in a district called Yangchun District, and I lived in the 5th floor of that apartment. And I never really left that safety area. And even if we did travel, it was usually within Korea, so I had nothing else to worry about. That was until one day my mom came to me and said I was going to be traveling from this place, 8,000 miles across Europe and Asia, to a little place called England, all the way in Europe. And I have to say, the first time I heard that, I was absolutely terrified. I was even more terrified when I found out that my brother and I were going to be the only Korean kids in school. And it was the same when I went up to high school. I was still pretty much the only Korean kid in school. Now, I became increasingly aware of the fact that I was different from other people around me. And what I tried to do to compensate for that, to overcome my fear of being different, I tried to make myself British. And I tried to assimilate myself into the culture I was surrounded by. And I did that. In order to become British, I had a few things I had to change. So first of all, I began to drop the pronunciation for the letter R. And I'm still stuck with that today. Second of all, I began to spell words with unnecessary R's, M's, and misplaced U's. And rice and kimchi were off my lunchbox menu until I could figure out exactly what British people have for lunch. I still haven't gotten an answer to that question yet, other than they like fish and chips, but until then it was strawberry sandwiches all the way, because 9-year-old Tony could only think of strawberry sandwiches when thinking of something that was very Western. So I thought this was something that would make me more British, and I thought it was working out pretty well, but one day I let my guard down, and there was a small incident that involved something. This. Now, this is barley tea, and in Korean it's boricha, and in Chinese it's damai cha. And what happened was, one day my mom told me to take this to school. And, well, it's really common to drink this in Korea. If you replace this for water, nobody would really say a thing because it was something that we drank commonly in Korea. If we were thirsty, we would drink it. If we had a sore throat, we would heat it up and drink it. So I took it to school without thinking about it. And that turned out to be a problem. Because when I went to school, my nice friend Harry there came up to me and asked me, "Dude, what do you have in that bottle?" So obviously I tried to explain to him that I had barley tea. And I faced a little bit of a problem, and that was I didn't know the word barley to explain it to him. And second of all, I didn't really understand myself why Korean people were drinking barley tea, whereas British people so obviously weren't. So I did the most obvious and most natural thing a scared 9-year-old would have done in that situation, and that was I lied to him, and I lied to his very face. And I told him it was apple juice, because they looked the same, and it was the first thing that popped into my mind. Now, everything would have worked out well if Harry had taken my word for it, but obviously he didn't. And he snatched the bottle from my hands, and he sniffed it, and he frowned, because it obviously was an apple juice. And when you looked at it, you could only see yellowish liquid. So he came to the very obvious conclusion that I was drinking pee from my bottle. And he told me, "Dude, what, you have pee in your bottle? Are you drinking pee?" Now, obviously that wasn't the case, and I wasn't drinking pee from my bottle. But at the time, I was too embarrassed to feel anything else, because I was afraid of being different, and this was obviously me being very different from my friends. So I had a little frown on my face, and I left the classroom after school. And it must have shown on my face, because the first thing my mom asked me when I came back, when she picked me up from school was something wrong? So I told her the little deal with Harry and I, and she did something that was extremely remarkable at the time, but I didn't really appreciate what she had done for me. All I was doing was, "Mom, stop this madness." But what she did was, she went to Harry's mom and began to explain what barley tea was, and what had happened between me and Harry, and why Korean people drank barley tea, and why it was good for you, and how you made it. And she commented on how they would also have like barley tea if they would have tried it, and that it definitely would not taste like pee. Now, what my mom did was, she wasn't afraid to be different. Rather, she embraced it, and she wasn't afraid to stand up for it. Because being different was what allowed you to share your experiences and be international in an environment that may have been alien to you. Now, back to the hermit crab. Well, the hermit crab, many people associate the hermit crab with an animal that has to start from the beginning once it sheds its shell, because it has to find a new home. But that's not really the case, because the hermit crab, even though it changes shells, it still takes themselves with them to their new shell. And all it's doing is to accommodate its growth, go and find a new shell. But essentially, they're not really changing anything. They're still hermit crabs, and their habits go along with them. Now, if I hadn't been different, I wouldn't have been able to feel the joy of building my first snowman, going to my first trick or treat, playing at an English parish church with a bunch of English people in front of a bunch of English people, or something as simple as going to church. Because if I was British, I would have taken all of this for granted. Now, we all go to a school, international school in Tianjin, and it's called the International School of Tianjin. And what makes IST so international for most people is the fact that we have teachers and students from over 40 countries around the world. Now, that obviously is a factor, but what if all those people acted the same way, liked the same things, ate the same food, spoke the same language, and looked the same? That wouldn't have made for a very international experience. It's the fact that everyone in this theater is willing to embrace their differences and appeal their differences to other people, and are willing to interact with those differences, that makes and that contributes to the international mood of IST. Now, I'm going to be graduating soon, and honestly, I don't know where I'm going to end up. Hopefully somewhere nice. And I will have to leave behind the shell of IST once I leave IST. And it's going to be a shame because IST has given me so much. But IST has also made my life a little difficult because it's given me so much that I wouldn't have been able to experience anywhere else, that now I've become so large to fit into my old shell, I'll have to go and search for a supersized shell when I graduate to accommodate my fat body. So I know that I will have to go and search for a new shell, but I also know that wherever I go, I will probably be a stranger because I lived in Tianjin for 4 years. But I know that wherever I go, I will be able to take my experiences and my identity with me, and that I won't be scared to be different and share my experiences and differences with other people wherever I go. So I want everyone in this theater to go home tonight and think of this little cute animal, and as you're going to sleep, just chant to yourself, tomorrow I'm going to be living like a hermit crab, and wherever I go, I'll live like a hermit crab. Thank you.